Hey everybody, it's Colette Baron-Reid. We're listening to Inside the Wooniverse. Woo² is our little mini chatty sessions that I do with Connie Diletti, our executive producer, and where we talk about basically anything, stuff that you ask us to talk about and stuff that we just want to talk about because we think it's cool or fun. And what are we talking about today? Because Connie is always the one who surprises me with the topic. What is it?
Yes, I am. I hope this is gonna be a big surprise. Okay, so today's topic, we all know oracle and tarot cards have been coined as a tool to predict the future.
Right.
But you actually have coined something else in that calling oracle cards a prescriptive tool.
Right.
Can we talk about the difference?
Yeah. And they're both right? So when I first started working with them, they were always about predictions, right? So that's
Mhm.
how I learned. That's exactly my Scottish nanny, Mrs. Kelly, that she was always
Yeah.
telling people what was going to happen. When my
Yes.
dad taught me Turkish coffee cups, he was telling me
Mhm.
about what was going to happen. But he would say,
Mhm.
here's what happened, here's what's going to
Mhm.
happen. So it was
Mhm.
always in my head that these things were predictive.
Right.
Then of course I got the therapist who taught me how to use them for self understanding, and that kind of gave it a different flavor. But that said, um,
Mhm.
my ability and my experience was as a predictive reader until, and I'll say that the point where I changed my mind about it. So I believe that they tell you your probable
Mhm.
and potential
Mhm.
reality and can track where you're likely heading.
Mhm.
But um, they're not written in stone. There's no such thing as anything written in stone.
Mhm.
Predictions are mutable. If a person doesn't change much, then it's very easy to predict for them. Very,
Mhm.
very easy because it's at that,
Right.
especially people who are not interested in being conscious of themselves. It's like
Right.
that's going to
Mhm.
happen. But I came to understand that the more I worked on myself and the more I had delved into different psychological modalities like Jung, et
Mhm.
cetera. I mean, I was doing a lot of studying as I was in this profession. I was in therapy plus
Yep.
studying everything I could about the human psyche. Like, why do we make our choices? It really hit me that what if I was predicting something based on where that person was? Because that's true. You predict from your vantage point. This is the vantage point, and this is what we see. Now, sometimes you just see things and they're just there because they're there. But we also have free will, right? So, what if you could become someone else? Like, what if you could become somebody new or more evolved? Would that
Mhm.
prediction still meet that persona, like who you are, who you've become? Is different. So then that prediction has to change. So I started
Mhm.
realizing that, wait a second, then I have to change my language around this because I have to tell the person based on today's point of vantage. And if you don't change anything, this is what I see here. And I would always add, but let's take a look at if you were
Mhm.
to do some evolutionary work, some deeper shadow work of really, taking a look at why you've been attracted to certain things, could there be a different outcome? Right?
Mhm.
So it's probable outcome, potential outcome, but never written in stone outcome.
Mhm.
So then the prescription for that would be, okay, well, what would I do? Who would I need to become to have that experience? Well, then you have the prescription. Well, here's how you would handle this energy for the
Mhm.
highest good. Here's how you would so the cards then would tell that story. So you then give that person an opportunity to be
Mhm.
empowered and to be able to make the changes, that they participate. Because as often in the beginning of my career, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying there's a lot of people who read like this, where the person receiving the reading is a passive receiver and you're the active giver, and there's a power dynamic that's not equal, right?
Mhm.
So, and really, you're saying this is what's coming, the end.
Mhm.
And I remember getting a reading from somebody who told me all this horrible stuff, which could have been true had I not gotten clean and sober. But when I got clean and
Mhm.
sober, I became a different person, and that
Mm.
no longer was my story, and it never,
Mhm.
and it just didn't. It wasn't
Right.
anymore. See what I mean? So I come from a place where I made a complete and absolute turnaround, and that wasn't a probability at all. That was like a
Mhm.
moment, a choice point where I changed my life. So I believe in both. I believe it's great to have some understanding of what's possibly coming down the pike or whatever.
Mhm.
But people have a tendency to get very hung up on that because they're looking for you to predict something so that they have control. or that they have certainty. And that is not always the healthiest thing. For me, it's better to be able to learn how do we navigate uncertainty and then step into the unknown where all the action is, because that's, if you don't want that, is there a choice? Like, what else could there be if this outcome is something that you don't want? Like, oh, I don't want
Mhm.
that. Okay, well, how would I
Yeah.
not have that?
Mhm.
So it's a funny subject because I remember knowing that very specifically there's 3 tarot cards in my experience. When they came together, they always related to a death. And
Mm.
that would inevitably would happen. And
Mhm.
so it would be scary for me sometimes, like, oh my God, those 3 cards came up, who's going to die? And
Which
I
ones are they? But just by the
Yeah,
way.
well, and again, they were for
Like the
me.
tower? Okay, for you,
No,
yeah.
no, no, no.
Oh, okay.
The death card with the Ace of Swords and a
Oh,
sword court card.
okay, okay, yep.
A court card of a
Mhm,
sword, the Ace of
mhm.
Swords, and the death card, all 3 together. It
Can
was
see that, yeah.
inevitable there would be
Okay,
something that would happen. And
okay.
I wouldn't always get the right person, but I would always write it down. You're
Right,
like,
okay.
"Ooh." And
Yeah.
so sometimes the cards predict something that, of course, would be scary and we don't want it to happen, especially if it's negative.
Mhm.
We want, "Oh, I don't
Right,
want that." Um,
yeah.
but we are always in motion, right? And we can be moving towards an object, right? Or a situation that's just
Mhm.
a natural progression of where we are now. And the cards can also
Mm,
reflect what we have to learn. And it's not
mhm.
always going to be pleasant.
No,
So,
it's not. It's
so the other reason
Yep.
why I wanted to do prescriptions is because I thought,
Mm,
well, what else? What if there could be a different thing that, like, why not? Because I'd also read
mhm,
that there were multiple dimensions and possibilities and potentials going on at the same time.
mhm, mhm.
So I always include, even though I have to be honest, it's much more popular to have a prediction. People like,
Right.
oh, she's going to make a prediction. I'm going to
Yeah.
feel better. I'm going to know what the future is going to hold. Therefore, I can
Right.
relax. Or
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
but I
Yeah.
always put the prescription in. Here's what I see. Here's the
Mm,
energy that I see coming in, but here's what you do with it. Here's what's
mhm,
possible with that. So I changed my readings dramatically and went more into the coaching element
mhm,
of helping people doing the reading, seeing what's potential. And
mhm,
inevitably those things would happen, but their approach to it would be very different because A, they were ready for it, or B, they were like, you know what, I'm going to make it mean something else, and I'm going to
mhm,
change myself. So readings can be very empowering, but sometimes they can be disempowering. And
mhm,
that's why I changed it. It's like, you know what, I'm going full on into both. And here's what's
mhm,
possible, what's potential, what's probable.
mhm.
Oh, and here's a possible outcome. And here's another possible outcome if you change this.
And just like a prescription in real life, if you were going to a pharmacy,
Right.
you can fill a prescription and then not take it. You
Correct.
can you can do the things that, "Oh, I'm just wrote
Yeah.
down what Colette said, and this is the month," and there's some certainty, but then if you don't actually, ta ingest the prescription and don't do that work, please don't be surprised if
I
then
I gotta tell you the funniest story. So that goes along with this prescription prediction thing. So,
Yeah.
my first husband and
Mhm,
I went to a tea leaf reader before we got
mhm.
married, just before we
Okay.
got married. And, we both came out of it completely freaked out because she told me that I would have 3 really difficult relationships, really painful
Mhm,
relationships,
mhm,
and that I would meet my blonde husband
mm,
uh, at blah blah blah, and I wouldn't have kids. Well, I couldn't have kids anyway, but it was just really interesting. And he was a musician and all this stuff.
mhm.
I'm like, what are you talking about? My husband is got dark hair and dark eyes. Anyway, and there's, what do you mean I'm going to have on my budget? Am I going to have an affair? Like, what the hell? She didn't even say one thing about me getting married right away. And
Wow.
she told him he
Mm.
was going to have a son, and a very quiet, really, really quiet, steady wife. Well, I am not quiet. And that he
Oh my
hadn't met
god.
her yet,
Wow.
right? So the 2 of us were like, "That was a waste of money." And meanwhile, 9
Meanwhile
or 10 months later, we were broke up. And exactly that. He met a very beautiful, quiet woman who's
wow.
fantastic, and he has a son, and he's so
Wow.
happy. He's the
Oh,
greatest. He's a great guy, my first husband. And my second husband, my only husband, my husband forever husband
yeah.
was a
Blonde.
musician,
Yeah.
is blonde, has
Mhm.
light-eyed, and is
Wow.
everything that she described. And
Wow.
so the prediction really didn't fit my life. So it was very disturbing.
Mm.
Right. So but I didn't, like I said to her, but I'm marrying somebody now. And she was just kind of like blank. Like there wasn't a discussion. It was like, well, that's not
She's
what the
like,
tea leaves
"Okay."
say.
Right,
I'm like, what are you
right.
talking about? This is all wrong. I can't believe I paid you money for this. And meanwhile, 100% accuracy. So I don't want to poo poo predictions.
Mm-mm,
I have
mm-mm.
made
No, of course.
really, really accurate predictions for people
Yeah.
because of the capacity to see. And it's not even with oracle cards. I can do it without anything. I can just
Mhm,
look into space and see it.
mhm.
But, prescription, when you're working with cards and you are seeing somebody's potential reality, I always love to say, I wonder what else is possible. Let's take a look at
Mhm,
another possible outcome. And if
mhm.
you would have to do anything, and sometimes I don't see it. I say, you know what? The elements aren't in place and I can't see anything. And so
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget, I have read thousands and thousands and
Yes,
thousands of people.
yes.
I worked as an intuitive because I retired 37, sorry, 35 years. I've been doing it for 35 years, full time, retired about from one-on-one sessions 5 years ago. So for 30
Mhm,
years, 30 years.
mhm. Yeah.
30. I've had a lot of experience with this.
Yes, and, like, just for, listeners, I mean, I would say probably most people are familiar with the predictive element of cards, but not
Exactly.
so much the prescriptive. I mean, I definitely also remember going to get readings and squeaking in prescriptions, being like they're like, "Okay, this is what's happening." I'm like, "Could something else happen?"
Right.
Like,
Could something
is
else
that
happen?
is that it? Like,
Yeah, because asking. So my forte now, I mean, well, my forte has always been business strategy, believe it or
yeah.
not, which is
Mhm.
it's been something that I find fascinating because there's less emotion attached to it. But
Yeah.
I in my school, in Oracle school, in the OCM Oracle Circle membership, I
Mhm.
really stress that ability for us to become empowered by asking cards, like by asking the questions of the cards, like what do I need to know about this in order to make choices and decisions? Then it's really more of an empowerment thing
Yeah.
and a way for us to self-reflect. So oracle cards for me today
Mm,
is about
mhm.
personal transformation, when I'm talking to a person. And so prescription is at the core of,
Yeah.
like, even when Deborah Silverman and I do, we're doing a course
Stars
with,
and
yeah,
cards.
Stars and Cards with Hay
Yes,
House is coming
yes.
out,
Yeah.
I think in 2024.
Yep.
She shows the fixed system of astrology, and it's a predictive system because we talk about the progressed moon,
Yep.
which is we each go through 2.5 years of different cycles. And then
Mm.
I navigate that. So I show people how to use cards to navigate it, which means
Mm.
what's coming up for me today around this? What could I do differently?
Mhm.
Where do I need to meet myself here with this overview? So it's a
Mhm.
dynamic thing. It's not a passive thing.
Yeah. It's so empowering. So empowering.
It can be. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, nobody can tell me that this isn't real. I mean, oh my God.
Right.
It's like I was like Lynn, we've had conversations with people. Like I'm like the biggest skeptic. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fascinated that I even do this for a living because I'm like, I'm
Really?
like, no, it's like I'm not one of these people where you say, oh, these dimensions and what I have had experience, like real
Yes.
time experience with this going, like, you
Mhm.
can't deny this. It's undeniable.
Mhm.
That's why I kept doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, this is real. Like, and then remember for
Yeah.
the longest time, I don't talk to dead people. Oh, no, no, no. I'm just really good at being able to tell the stories of the people that are dead. Right. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, then I started
AKA
smelling them,
mediumship. Yeah.
AKA mediumship. I didn't want to claim that for the longest time. I refused to claim the moniker. I'm like,
Mhm.
no way am I that. No.
Yeah.
But I was.
Even during the TV show,
The
you're like,
TV
"Yeah,
show.
but, like, put that as the last descriptor of me. No,
No,
actually, this
Colette, we
whole
gave
show
you
is about
the
you."
whole story. The TV show is about you as a medium, not like you as all the other
Oh my
things.
gosh. Amazing. I love it.
I don't know, it's interesting. I think life is fascinating, and it makes me think about, Greg Braden talked a lot about the fact that, that this is like a simulation. At times
Mm.
he's talked
Yep,
about that, or that we're in
yep.
this matrix. And I
Yes.
love that we get to play in this matrix. And who was the other one that did playing in the matrix? Mike Dooley.
Mike Dooley,
Yes.
love Mike Dooley.
Right?
Oh my
It's
goodness,
true. We
yes,
get to create
yes,
reality. And
yes,
we have to surrender to life on life's terms. But like that's the
yeah.
other thing. Like predictions can be very static and like that's your life. Like,
Yeah.
what if I don't want that? No, I wanna
Yes.
make a change. No, I don't like
Again,
that. That's not good
what's
enough.
the alternative? What's the alternative?
What's the
Yes.
alternative? That's not good.
Yeah,
No, I want something
yeah.
different, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
change. That's the point,
Yeah.
And then there's sometimes the thing is way down the line, right? Like,
Mm.
oh my god, like, what if something takes 20 years and you can't and you then you sabotage yourself because it didn't happen in the timetable, right? Like, they said that was gonna happen. Meanwhile, the timetable is like, we don't see time. I don't know anybody that's really, really good with time. Like, I was always hit and miss. I told somebody one time, "Oh, this will take 2 years." It took 2 days. 3 days later, "You know that thing you said was gonna come in 2 years? Well, it just happened yesterday." And, now what?
Time. I mean, what is it? And it doesn't it seem to be getting more looser? Like, it's
Yeah.
just not it's just
You
not
can you
a
can your story is your story, and I always say too, like, don't make a reading a hitching post. It's a guidepost.
Mhm.
Don't hitch yourself to this. Don't
Yeah.
don't hold on to the form because you hear what you wanna hear a lot of times too. But it's a great subject. I could talk about this forever.